Matchlock. Obviously, the massacre using this mechanism ignited the primer powder with a slow match. Then, there is a percussion cap lock, which, just as clearly, uses a percussion cap as the primer to fire the gunpowder. But if a flint is a tool that ignites the powder, is it automatically a flintlock? Today, let's talk about what we call the flintlock. Broadly speaking, that's correct. Any firelock that uses a flint to strike a freezer and ignite the gunpowder can be called a flintlock. Therefore, types like the snaplock, snaphance, lock, doglock, and the true flintlock all fall under this category. However, there are actual differences among them in a narrow sense. Only the French flintlock is considered the true flintlock, while the others are distinct precursor or variants. It's difficult to pin down an exact year for their invention. However, we know that the snaplock, snaphance, and lock appeared in the early 16th century. Later, after the late 17th century through the 1720s, the doglock became more common. The so-called true flintlock was developed in France in the early 17th century. Although its exact origins remain obscure, credit is usually given to Martin Lepore, an artist, gunsmith, and inventor from Normandy. For a time, the doglock and the true flintlock coexisted, but eventually, history favored the true flintlock, and the doglock faded with the main stage. Afterwards, the flintlock remained the mainstream choice for nearly 200 years in the Western world. So, what are the differences among these flint-based mechanisms? First, let's look at the snaphance or snaphance. The name is Dutch in origin, so the mechanism itself might not have started in the Netherlands. Beyond Europe, this type was also found in North Africa and the Middle East. The name is thought to come from the Dutch snapham, which roughly means pecking rooster, referring to the mechanism's downward starting action. This might also explain why we call the component that holds the flint a cork. How does it work? Its basic principle is the same as the true flintlock we know well. The main difference lies in the components. Typically, the snaphance still had a separate pen cover, similar to a matchlock. However, it also featured a freezer connected to the pen cover by a rod. When the cork strikes the freezer, the cover opens automatically as the freezer moves. It's a clever design, but the downside is obvious. The complex structure made it harder to maintain. Next is the snaplock. If you remember the Swedish Snaplock massacre we discussed 8 months ago, you already have a good idea of how it works. Its exact origin is unclear, but it likely emerged in Northern Europe during the 16th century. Sweden and Germany are both strong candidates for its birthplace. Mechanically, taking the Swedish snaplock as an example, it uses a large external main spring to power the cork. The snaplock simplifies things by removing the separate pen cover. Its freezing functioned both as the striking surface and the cover itself, much like a true flintlock. By eliminating the connecting rod, the design became simpler and more reliable in harsh environments. You might see photos online labeled snaplock that looks more like a snaphance. This isn't necessarily a mistake. These locks often share the same style of main spring and cork, with the only real difference being the pen cover mechanism. However, it's worth mentioning that the snaplock and the snaphance are indeed very similar, perhaps even part of the same technological family. In Swedish, the word snaphance was first recorded in 1558 in a letter from King Gustav I to his son, Duke John of Finland. As time went on, documents from the Royal Armoury in Stockholm in 1730, as well as common oral descriptions, seem to use terms like snaphance and snaplocks interchangeably to refer to the same mechanism. Then there's the Miklet lock, which we also touched upon a few months ago. This was very popular in Mediterranean countries and the Caucasus region. Although it appeared in the 16th century, it felt quite modern, almost like a true flintlock. It was compact, but functioned differently. It featured a smaller external mainspring and an integrated freezing with pen cover. Finally, the dog lock. This is the closest relative to the true flintlock. The primary difference is the dog, an external safety catch. When the cork is at half cock, this safety hooks into it, locking it securely so it can't fire. To shoot, you pull the cork back to the full cork position, which disengages the safety and releases the gun. Well, we've discussed the many historical locks. Some of you might be thinking of the firelocks. However, the firelocks didn't use flint. It used a pirate clamped in the cork. So, technically, the firelocks isn't even a flintlock in the broad sense. In conclusion, these mechanisms are all distinct. Whether you prefer to call them all flintlocks in a broad sense or insist that only the French design is a true flintlock, it's entirely up to you. It really just comes down to two different approaches: speaking more boldly or taking a narrow focus. So, stay safe, take care, and see you next time.